Xanax bars, Percocets and Loratabs, values, morphine patches, ecstasy, and it's all up a grab. What you want, what you need, hit me up, I got you, man. What you want, what you need, hit me up, I got you, man.
Scarecrow, what's that? You poppin' a powerful pill they call Oxycontin, but I'm a pill poppin' animal. Syrup, sippin' nigga, I'm a pill poppin' animal. Syrup, sippin' nigga, syrup, sippin' nigga, syrup, sippin' nigga.
It is the distribution, sale, and exportation of prescription drugs. Drugs more powerful, more addicting, more deadly than any that have come before.
One pill makes you larger, and one pill makes you small. And the one...
It is an unseen epidemic that is raging unchecked across the land. A tidal wave of drugs with the power to destroy your body, steal your soul, and snuff out your life.
People are now abusing prescription pain medication more than heroin, cocaine, and ecstasy combined. And the drug of choice for a growing number of users is oxycodone, a synthetic opioid best known for the brand name Oxycontin. It's basically heroin made in a lab.
I know you share with me the frustration of trying to help people understand the prescription pill epidemic and the fact that just because doctors are prescribing something doesn't mean it's okay for an addict.
And just to put it in people terms, it's an uncontrollable craving that takes over, and it can be triggered by one drop.
But I think what people misunderstand is it doesn't have to be an awareness of craving. It can be just, here's what my drug addicts always do. It's like, yeah, I haven't used cocaine in a long time, but God, I'd sure love to see Jill. Or I'd love to see Jane. I'd love to see Jane. Well, who's Jane? Well, Jane's somebody I used to do drugs with, and we used to buy from there. But I just got to see Jane, and I'll be the doctor saying, no, don't see Jane. Don't go see Jane. Because that's your brain going, I want to do drugs. You just don't know that.
One of the problems with opiates can actually make long-term or irreversible changes in a person's brain chemistry. They're very powerfully addictive. As people become dependent on those, their brain really screams out they need to use them again, and may scream it out for a long period of time. It takes 6 to 18 months if their brain can stabilize. If a person's used them for over a year, they may have irreversible changes in their brain chemistry.
Which is that there's a part of your brain below consciousness, below your reasoning center, below your feeling center, deeper in the sort of drive system, in the center of the brain. It's an area called the medial forebrain bundle that sets up drives like survival and hunger and those kinds of things. That drive becomes distorted in addiction, so all of these higher mechanisms, our wonderful reasoning and our will and our volition and our love of our families, all these things now serve a distorted drive, which is permanently there. It's much more active when you're using, and then all the distortions occur, and it settles down a little bit when you maintain your sobriety. But addicts tend to seek out other addicts. They tend to find people that support their way of thinking, and they become co-addicts together.
And personal experience when I think, let's say a sober buddy has slipped and they get extremely angry at you, rageful, they deny it, and they basically blame you for messing with them.
And cut you off.
And
then at that point, they don't want to be around you anymore.
But the cutting off is what you need to be willing to risk.
But you don't.
You need to be willing to risk that to save that person's life. And here's what you do. And here's what I do is when I know you're gonna evoke righteous indignation. And here's what you do. You laugh. You go,
what are you, fucking nuts?
But what I can tell you is that no one person can do more for someone than they want to do for themselves.
Prescription drugs are far and away our worst drug problem. They pose a major public health challenge and a public safety challenge. They are the top killers of our citizens, prescription drugs. The illegal use, abuse, diversion of those drugs.
Like any social or cultural phenomenon, drug abuse is an evolutionary process subject to trends and fads and economic moods.
A trend so alarming, police are alerting everyone they can.
It is the latter, the prescription pills, that have set the drug world on its ear and sent the law enforcement community scrambling to keep up.
Today, it's the pills. And the pills put both crack and meth like they're little brothers. It just puts them to shame. We have way more crime relating to the pills, way more deaths relating to the pills than we ever had with crack cocaine in the 80s.
Heroin.
As creative as the dealers are at finding loopholes in the law, Users too keep finding new ways to get high on pills.
They can be snorted, they can be used intravenously, injected into your veins, or there's a new form of what they call smoking the boat, where it's put on aluminum foil and melted down, and it runs down the aluminum foil and they suck up the smoke that comes off the pill as it's melting down.
These creative techniques get the drugs into the bloodstream faster and hasten the high, but they come at a substantial risk.
Anyone who gets a prescription and doesn't follow it, just like it's written, is really, it's a dangerous game to be playing. So, you know, especially when we're talking about narcotics, it's extremely dangerous.
Today, the Centers for Disease Control announced that the 2009 National Youth Risk Behavior Survey found that 1 in 5 high school students in the United States have taken a prescription drug, such as OxyContin, Percocet, Vicodin, Adderall, Ritalin, or Xanax, without a doctor's prescription.
And it's been a dramatic shift. As an organization founded in 1980, our primary patient was an adult male with alcohol problems, usually 40 to 50 years old. Today, if you look in our adult detox unit, 70% of our patients will be in their 20s, and their addiction will be to prescription painkillers, which is a much more difficult addiction for them to deal with.
You know, I needed help, and I was in the waiting process to get help. I was waiting for a bed space available, and obviously within that waiting time I was using because I was an addict, and you know, I got drug tested before a bed space was available, and you know, that kind of landed me in here because I failed my drug test. I just learned that, you know, you just can't be influenced so easily, and you just have to stick by your morals. Like, and honestly, I know it's cliche, but just say no, to drugs.
When you see children, drugs are mine. And if you don't believe me, ask your dad. And if you don't believe him, ask your mom. She'll tell you how she does them all the time. So kids say no to drugs, so you don't act like everyone else does. And there's really nothing else to say. Drugs are just bad and good.
So let's talk a little bit about the neuroscience of addiction. Some people like opioids because we've got internal opioid receptors. Why are they there? Because the brain produces opioids, endorphins, and other similar substances. It's part of our pleasure system. So what happens then is if you bathe the brain in what would be massive quantities compared to internally produced substances, the brain tries to normalize itself. It's called homeostasis. It wants to stay the same. So it changes, it adapts. So there's this neuroadaptation process that occurs. After a period of time, these changes become permanent. You can live without drinking alcohol, and those changes in control don't bother you after, let's say, a year or so. But with opioids, it's different. What happens is, if you take away the external opioid, you stop using heroin, you stop using OxyContin, or whatever it is, you have an underperforming internal opioid system. You can't experience ordinary pleasure. You don't feel good in your own skin. Every day's a lousy day. It's always gray, and you kind of feel vaguely depressed and irritable. That's what drives people back to using. That is so powerful that in one long-term study, a 30-year study of heroin addicts, people who had been abstinent from heroin for 15 years still had a 25% relapse rate.
Just like